Today, we're pulling back the curtain on how big interchange projects come to life. If you've ever wondered why it takes so long to approve a freeway interchange, you're not alone. Major projects like the planned upgrade of I-10 Cherry Valley Boulevard Interchange can span years. But there's a good reason for every step in the process. This is a must-watch episode. Stay tuned.
This is the Calimesa Insider Podcast, the original Pass Area City podcast, focusing on the ins and outs of your city government at work. And now, here's the host of Calimesa Insider, City Manager Will Kolbow.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to episode 49. Last time we talked about gas tax, so today we're going to talk about one of the ways those dollars go to work and walk through the Caltrans QMAP, which stands for Quality Management Assessment Process, and break down the key phases on an interchange improvement project. Don't worry, we'll keep it informative and accessible. I'll explain each phase in plain language with real examples from the I-10 Cherry Valley Boulevard Interchange project right here in Calimesa. By the end, you'll understand why these projects take time, and hopefully you'll feel more confident about what's happening behind those orange cones and planning documents. But before we get to that, there are a couple of things I want to cover. First, speaking of Caltrans, I would like to address the complaints that we've been getting about the new signals at I-10 and County Line Road. The complaints are certainly warranted. I too have witnessed the issues that we have heard about, particularly the tight turning radii and narrow lanes caused by all the barriers, which kind of seem like overkill. I've been stuck behind big rigs that we have been not able to navigate the turns. And I feel like those barriers are actually causing more problems than they may be attempting to prevent. The frustration that people get is that when they call the city, we are telling them it's Caltrans's problem. We are telling them that because it's true. If our crews just went out and moved things around, like they literally could get arrested for doing work in the state right-of-way without a permit. So just go get a permit, you say. Based on what we would need to do, it would take, no joke, a year. So the tact we are taking with Caltrans instead is to tell them that they are going to have a major liability on their hands if they don't make some changes. This will likely get them to respond since they are completely risk averse. That stance is actually what makes processing anything through Caltrans take so long, which is why I'm absolutely shocked they signed off on the design to begin with. But Calimesa, along with Ukaipa, is hounding Caltrans to fix it, not because of the complaints, but because it's a big problem and they're the only ones that can solve it. So that's what we're doing there. Secondly, the next City Council meeting will take place this coming Monday, June 2nd at our normal 6 p.m. time at the Norton Young Love Senior Center. One item of note, the adoption of the budget, item JM1, will be continued to June 16th. There is no issue with the budget, but we have become aware of an additional legal formality that we must do prior to the adoption of the budget, and the agenda had already been posted before we became aware of it. So we will take care of that and the adoption of the budget on June 16th, ahead of the start of our July 1st fiscal year. Our economic development consultant, Cosmont, will be providing a presentation on a market analysis they have prepared for the city. This will set the foundation and framework for developing an economic development strategy and inform the city on what would be a viable development in our commercial areas. The presentation will cover commercial, industrial, multifamily residential, and medical markets. Finally, the City Council will be asked to adopt the updated fire severity zone mapping that is required by the state. Staff is not recommending any changes to the mapping. We would only be allowed to make the maps more restrictive, and we believe they are already too restrictive as they are, but we can't make any changes or challenge the state's findings. You can attend live and in person or watch it on the city's YouTube page at calimesa.gov/YouTube. You can find the complete agenda packet on our homepage at calimesa.gov and clicking on the Agendas and Minutes button. So whether you're driving on I-10 every day or just curious about how transportation projects work, today's deep dive will guide you through the journey from the first idea for a better interchange all the way to opening it up for traffic. So let's get started at the very beginning. What is QMAP? Before we jump into the phases, let's talk about the Caltrans QMAP process. Caltrans, short for the California Department of Transportation. We use that a lot on here, but we don't really define it always. They oversee all of our state highways, like Interstate 10, and must review and approve any project on those highways. This includes projects initiated by local cities and counties. If a city like Calimesa wants to approve a freeway interchange, they can't just go out with shovels and start building. They have to follow Caltrans' process and meet the state standards every step of the way. QMAP, short for Quality Management Assessment Process, is essentially Caltrans' roadmap for projects on the state highway system, especially when the projects are sponsored by a local agency. Think of QMAP as a structured checklist to ensure quality and compliance for complex projects. Under standard QMAP, a project goes through the same major development phases as any Caltrans project. It starts with the project initiation document, then moves into project approval and environmental document phase, then into plan specifications and estimates, and so on. Each phase has specific tasks and checkpoints. So why have a process like QMAP? Caltrans is protecting the public's investment by making sure the project is feasible, safe, and well-planned. QMAP helps clarify procedures and develop a realistic schedule early on, so there are fewer surprises later. For a big project like an interchange upgrade, following QMAP ensures all the bases are covered from initial concept to the ribbon cutting. Now let's walk through these key phases one by one using the I-10 Cherry Valley Boulevard Interchange project as our guide. This interchange located in Calimesa, but serving both Calimesa and Beaumont, as well as Cherry Valley, is being reconfigured into a new design, and it's currently in the design stage. By following its story, you can illustrate each step of the QMAP in action. So, where does a project like this begin? It all starts with identifying a need and putting it onto paper, the project initiation phase. Every big journey begins with the first step. For interchange projects, that first step is preparing a project initiation document, or PID. The PID is essentially the project's blueprint at the conceptual level. It's an engineering report that documents the project's scope, cost estimate, and schedule. In other words, the PID spells out what problem we're trying to solve, the purpose and the need, how we propose to solve it, the basic scope of work, roughly how much it might cost, and how long it might take. It's like the project's business plan or proposal. For locally sponsored projects like our Cherry Valley Interchange, which is led by the City of Calimesa in cooperation with Caltrans, the PID often takes a specific form called a Project Study Report Project Development Support. This is PSR or PDS. That's a mouthful, but essentially it's a streamlined PID used under QMAP for local projects. Calimesa did exactly this. They initiated a PSR PDS in 2017 for the interchange upgrade. This document laid out the case for the project. Traffic was growing, the old Diamond Interchange was getting congested, and something needed to be done. The PSR PDS outlined potential solutions like different interchange designs, and it was approved by June 2018. So what did that approval mean? It meant Caltrans conceptually agreed, yes, this project made sense. The PID approval gave the city the green light to proceed to more in-depth work. It also allowed the project to be considered for funding programs. So imagine you're planning a home remodel. The PID phase is like drafting a rough plan and budget to show the bank and getting a thumbs up in principle. Doesn't mean you can start construction, but it means your plan is sound enough to move forward and seek funding. During this phase, they also establish a project development team, key engineers, planners, and stakeholders who will shepherd the project. It's a bit like assembling the crew for a movie production, but here it's for a highway project. In summary, the project initiation is all about defining the project at a high level and proving it's worthwhile. By the end of phase one, we have a clear purpose and need, a proposed solution concept, and an initial plan for funding and schedule. The I-10 Cherry Valley project PID laid out the groundwork by 2018, identifying a divergent diamond interchange as a promising solution, among others, and setting the stage for detailed studies. Now that the idea was officially on the books, it was time to really dive in and study it from every angle, which brings us to the next phase. Once the project concept is approved, we enter the project approval and environmental document phase, commonly known as PA and ED. This is where the project undergoes detailed scrutiny, engineering analysis, environmental studies, and public review to arrive at a formally approved plan. If the PID was the idea, PA and ED is about redefining that idea and making sure it's environmentally and legally sound. The intent of the PA&ED phase is to gather public input, study different options, and prepare the required environmental documentation. In plain terms, Caltrans and the project team ask, what exactly are we going to build? What are the alternatives, and what impacts will they have? This phase must comply with environmental laws like the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and often, as in the case of Cherry Valley, the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. It's all about doing our homework before any shovel hits the dirt. So here's what happens in PA&ED. Engineering studies are done to flesh out multiple alternatives for the project. They might consider a few different interchange designs or options, including a required no-build alternative for basically doing nothing for comparison. Environmental studies are conducted for each alternative. These studies look at things like traffic noise, air quality, impacts on plants and wildlife, effects on nearby homes or businesses, cultural and historical resources, water quality, you name it. For a big interchange project, there could be dozens of separate studies, traffic, noise, biological, and more, all documented in the environmental document. The team also consults with other agencies, for example, fish and wildlife agencies if endangered species might be affected, or water quality boards if runoff is an issue. There's a lot of interagency coordination at this stage. Public input is a key part. Often there are public meetings or hearings where community members can comment on the project alternatives and environmental findings. The feedback is important and can influence the choice or alternative or mitigation issues. Finally, after all studies and public review, a preferred alternative is selected and the project is officially approved in a project report, which summarizes the plan, and a final environmental document. For I-10 Cherry Valley Boulevard, the PA&ED phase was indeed a marathon. The City of Calimesa and Caltrans studied 3 alternatives. Alternative 1 was no build, just keep things as is. Alternative 3 was a diverging diamond interchange, or DDI. And alternative 4 was a partial cloverleaf interchange. We had to evaluate each of those, how they'd improve traffic, and what impacts they'd have. For instance, a diverging diamond would handle left turns differently and might need less land than a cloverleaf. The environmental analysis looked at all angles, and after public input, including a public hearing that was held here at the city in early 2022, the alternative 3, the diverging diamond, was chosen as the final design. This choice was likely because it optimized traffic flow and safety with fewer conflict points, and it balanced impacts effectively, as the study showed. By November 2023, the environmental clearance was achieved. The final project report was approved on November 17, 2023, and the environmental document was approved that same month. That's the moment the project truly got its formal go-ahead to proceed. Essentially, Caltrans signed off on project approval, meaning the Cherry Valley Interchange project satisfied all the requirements and could move forward into implementation. Now, it took about 5 years of work to get through PA&ED for this project, which might seem long, but it's not uncommon for a project of this scale. But why so long? Because thorough environmental review and project development takes time. The team had to ensure the new interchange would not cause significant harm, or if it would have impacts like construction noise or need for property, that those would be addressed with proper mitigation. They even had to consider the no-build scenario in detail, as required by law, to prove that doing nothing would be worse for traffic and the community. This careful process is critical. It prevents costly mistakes and controversies down the line. Think of PA&ED as doing all the safety checks and paperwork you need before constructing a house: soil tests, building permits, addressing neighbors' concerns, etc. You wouldn't want to skip those and find out later you built on unstable ground. Similarly, we don't want to rush an interchange without dotting the I's and crossing the T's. The result of PA&ED for Cherry Valley: a clear path, building a divergent diamond interchange with Caltrans and the city in agreement, and all environmental approvals in hand. This phase concluded with a fat binder of documents and a stamp of approval, but not a single bulldozer in the field yet. Next comes turning all those studies and decisions into actual construction plans. Now that we know what we're building and have the environmental green light, how do we get ready for construction? That's where the detailed design comes in, which is our next phase. Phase 3 is all about taking the project from concept to concrete details. PS&E stands for Plans, Specifications, and Estimates, basically the final design phase. Up to now, we had a broad plan and an approved concept, but now engineers must get down to the nitty-gritty details. This phase produces the official construction plans, the thick book of technical specifications, and a refined cost estimate for the job. A key rule: the PS&E phase cannot begin until the project approval and environmental document are finished. For Cherry Valley, that meant PS&E kicked off after late 2023. In fact, the city put out a request for proposals to hire specialized consultants to prepare the PS&E package. They needed roadway designers, structural engineers for the new bridge, or bridges actually, over I-10, hydraulic engineers for design drainage, traffic signal designers, and so on. What happens during PS&E? It's a very technical phase, but in simple terms, detailed engineering plans are developed. This includes everything from the alignment of new lanes and ramps, the profiles of the road, the design of the new overpass bridge structure, retaining walls, drainage systems, pavement thickness, striping, signage, lighting, all the details that a contractor would need to actually build the interchange. If you ever see those large rolls of blueprints, that's the output of PS&E. Specifications are written. These are like the instructions and standards for construction. They cover what materials to use, how to mix the concrete, how to sequence the work, testing requirements, and much more. Essentially, specs ensure the project is built to the right quality. It's not just about what to build, but how to build it correctly. Estimates are updated. Remember, the PID had a rough cost estimate. During PS&E, as things get designed in detail, they continually update the cost estimate to reflect real expected cost. By the end of PS&E, you have a pretty solid idea that, say, this interchange will cost, for example, $70 million, higher than the original estimate in the $50 to $60 million range. This is crucial for securing funding and budgeting for the project. To give you a sense of scope, engineers will conduct new surveys and geotechnical tests to know exactly what the soil is like, where the new foundations will go. They prepare technical reports. For Cherry Valley. There would be updated traffic handling patterns, structural calculations, drainage reports, etc. The design is refined and finalized. If during environmental studies they had a concept drawing, now they turn it into a buildable design with all dimensions and reinforcements specified. They also figure out exactly how much land is needed. Sometimes detailed design might reveal you need a slightly larger piece of land here or there, or maybe less in some areas. Utility relocations are planned in this stage too. For example, if there's a water line or power line in the way of a new ramp, the plans will show how it's relocated. For the I-10 Cherry Valley DDI project, the PS&E phase is happening right now. The city and Caltrans are reviewing design submittals, checking that everything meets state standards. Caltrans District 8, which covers our region, will be deeply involved in reviewing those plans. After all, it's their highway. And Caltrans must ultimately approve the PS&E package before it can go out to bid. This ensures quality control, hence the quality management in QMAP. Why is PS&E so important? Because a mistake in design can be very costly during construction. The PS&E phase is like the dress rehearsal. Better to catch it and correct issues on paper than in the field. It's also when they plan how to maintain traffic during construction, and we'll get to that more in a minute. If the P&ED phase was about what we're going to do, PS&E is about how exactly we're going to do it, down to each bolt and beam. It's meticulous work and can take a year or two for a project this size. Think of it like this. If you were building a house, P&ED was getting the planning permission and choosing your design, and PS&E is working with the architect and engineer on the construction blueprints, picking the exact materials, drawing the wiring diagrams, and finalizing the budget. You wouldn't want builders to start with just a sketch on a napkin. You want a detailed plan. And that's what PS&E provides for interchange construction. With the Cherry Valley project, as PS&E progresses, the city and Caltrans will be gearing up for the next big step, acquiring any remaining land and then hiring a contractor to build it. So let's talk about that land piece next, because you can't build it if you don't have the right to build, if you don't have rights to the property. So major highway projects often need to use land that the agency doesn't already own. This could be slivers of private property at the corners of an interchange for widening, or larger parcels if ramps are being reconfigured. The term right-of-way refers to the land and rights to use that land for the project itself. Right-of-way acquisition is the process of buying or otherwise securing all the property interests needed for the project. For I-10 Cherry Valley Interchange, let's consider this. Converting to a diverging diamond might require wider bridge approaches and possibly new alignment for the on and off ramps. The project might need to realign a portion of Calimesa Boulevard as well, as in fact, the city has a separate plan to realign Calimesa Boulevard slightly as a related improvement. We may need pieces of land from nearby properties to make those changes. Acquiring right-of-way can be one of the trickiest and slowest parts of a project timeline. Typically, actual property acquisition can only start once the environmental document is done and the project is approved, because you need to know exactly which land you need. You wouldn't start buying land before deciding an alternative, for example. However, preliminary work like appraisals and talking to property owners can start earlier to save time. So here's how the right-of-way phase works. You first identify properties that are impacted. The design plans from PS&E will show the footprint of the new interchange. Any portion of that footprint not already within the existing freeway right-of-way has to be acquired. It might be full property buys if an entire parcel is needed, or partial sliver takes a few feet of someone's frontage. Next, we appraise the value of each needed property or easement. By law, the government must pay fair market value for property, basically what it's worth on the open market. The next thing is to offer compensation and negotiate with property owners. In an ideal situation, the owner and agency reach an amicable agreement. The owner is paid a fair price and possibly relocation assistance if, say, a business has to be moved. We may need to do eminent domain or condemnation if needed. If an agreement can't be reached, Caltrans or the city, depending on who's acquiring, can ultimately invoke eminent domain, a legal process to acquire the property for public use with compensation determined by the courts. This is a last resort and can be contentious, so we try to avoid that, but it's sometimes necessary for critical infrastructure. Caltrans would have to get approval from the California Transportation Commission to condemn property. Utility relocations and rights are part of this too. So sometimes the project needs to move in a utility line, which might require an easement. Coordinating with utility companies, electric, gas, water, telecom, is also under the right-of-way umbrella because you need the rights to move or place new utility lines. Now, why does right-of-way take so long? Consider this. Even a straightforward property buy, like a single-family house, often takes around 8 months from approval to closing, escrow. That's assuming that the owner is willing and everything goes smoothly. If an owner challenges the offer and it goes into the legal process, it can drag on, sometimes 2 years or more for resolution. Multiply that by several parcels and you see the potential for delay. Also, if people live or have businesses on the affected properties, relocation has to be handled with care, and there are laws ensuring assistance and fair treatment for displaced persons. For the Cherry Valley projects, we don't have all the details on required right-of-way yet. As of right now, the design is still being finalized, so right-of-way needs are to be determined. But it's a safe bet that some pieces of land will need to be acquired, perhaps at the ramp intersections or along Cherry Valley Boulevard where it will be wide. The City of Calimesa will work with Caltrans on this. Usually the local agency takes the lead on acquisitions, but everything must meet Caltrans requirements for certification. Now, speaking of certification, before the project can go out to construction bidding, Caltrans requires a certification that all required right-of-way is secured or will be secured by the time it's needed. This is basically a formal sign-off that we have the land to build this. So right-of-way acquisition is on the critical path. If it gets delayed, the whole project waits. So if the PID and PA&ED phases were about paperwork and studies, right-of-way brings in real people's properties and sometimes emotional stakes. It's an aspect of projects that agencies handle very sensitively. They'll often start outreach to affected owners early on, even during the environmental studies, to prepare them and negotiate in good faith. So by the end of phase 4, the project team aims to have all the land in hand. We've got an approved project, a completed design, and the necessary land. The next question is, who's actually going to build this thing? That's where phase 5 kicks in. So now we turn the project over to the marketplace of construction contractors. Phase 5 is bidding and awarding. Basically, the project is of selecting a construction, the process, of selecting a construction contractor who will physically build the interchange. In this phase, the agency, most likely the city, or in conjunction with maybe another regional agency that will help us out, will advertise the project for bids. Advertise means they publicly announce that the plans and specs are ready and invite qualified contractors to take a look and submit a bid or a price proposal to do the work. For public projects in California, this is typically an open competitive bidding process. The contract is usually awarded to the lowest responsible bidder, meaning the qualified contractor who offers the lowest price. Here's how it typically goes. First prepare a bid package. By the end of PS&E, the team compiles everything into a bid package, plans, specifications, and other contract documents. They also set some requirements like the timeline for construction, any special qualifications needed, etc. They double check that the package is complete and accurate. All the details need to be correct because contractors will base their prices on this information. Next is the advertising period. The project is advertised for a certain period of time, say a few weeks or maybe a month or more. During this time, contractors get the plans, visit the site, maybe ask questions. There's often a Q&A process or pre-bid meeting, and then prepare their bid. Next comes the bid opening. Contractors submit sealed bids by a deadline. When open, the prices are read and recorded. It's an exciting moment. Will the bids come in under the estimate or over? How many bidders? The lowest bid is identified. Next comes the award. The agency then reviews the lowest bid carefully to ensure it's responsive and responsible, that the contractor hasn't missed anything major, and that they have the qualifications. If all checks out, they award the construction contract to that lowest bidder. A contract is signed, and now we have a builder on board. It sounds straightforward, but there are some nuances. All prerequisites must be met before advertising. As mentioned earlier, Caltrans requires certain certifications before the project can be advertised. One crucial one is right-of-way certification, confirming all necessary property is acquired or agreements in place. Also, any required permits from other agencies like the water boards, air quality districts, etc., should be secured by this point. Essentially, they make sure nothing will prevent a contractor from getting on the site and starting work when the time comes. Funding needs to be secured too. The agency will only advertise if they know they have the funding for the construction contract. By this phase, the funding puzzle should be solved, often through a mix of sources, city funds, county transportation funds, state or federal grants, etc. For instance, if part of the funding is coming from a state program, the money would be allocated by now. In our example, the Cherry Valley Interchange, with an estimated cost of $70 million, will require multiple funding sources. Ensuring all those dollars are committed is a behind-the-scenes process that actually might have been ongoing since the PID phase, which it has been. By the time of bidding, the project should have its budget lined up. Sometimes there are delays or hiccups. If bids come in too high, the agency might need to seek funding, extra funds or even adjust the project scope and rebid. Or occasionally, a losing bidder might protest the award. These things can add a bit of time, but ideally it goes smoothly. For our project, for our Cherry Valley project, this bidding phase is still in the future. They have to finish the PS&E and right-of-way first, but once those are done, you might see a notice going out and later an announcement like contract awarded to XYZ Construction for I-10 Cherry Valley Interchange. This will be a big milestone. It means construction is imminent. It's worth noting this phase is relatively short compared to the others. Bidding and award can happen in a matter of months. It's the bridge between years of planning and years of construction. And it's tightly regulated for fairness and transparency because we're dealing with public funds. All right, so imagine we've reached this point. A contractor is on board, crews are gearing up, and the community is about to see actual bulldozers and cranes at work. Let's talk about what happens during construction and why that event isn't instant pudding. So now we're at the phase that most people notice, construction, where the plans on paper turn into asphalt and concrete on the ground. For an interchange project, construction is a huge undertaking, often lasting 2 to 3 years or more, depending on complexity. Let's break down what happens and why it takes as long as it does. Now, when the contractor takes over the site, their job is to build the project according to the plans and specs. For the I-10 Cherry Valley Interchange, construction will involve, number one, building a new diverging diamond overcrossing, which will replace the existing Cherry Valley Boulevard Bridge over I-10, realigning on and off ramps into the new configuration, widening Cherry Valley Boulevard itself and adding things like sidewalks and bike lanes, adding auxiliary lanes on Interstate 10 between nearby off-ramps. Those are like extra lanes to help with merging, installing new traffic signals, lighting, signage, and landscaping. And of course, demolition of some of the old structures, grading earth, paving, striping, all the typical road construction tasks. Now, one big reason road construction takes time is the need to keep traffic flowing while work happens. Caltrans can't just close I-10 for months. Tens of thousands of vehicles use it daily. So the contractor will follow a detailed traffic management plan that was set up in design. These projects or these plans spell out when and how the contractor can close lanes or ramps, and how to detour or handle traffic to minimize congestion and inconvenience. Often, major lane closures are restricted to nights or off-peak hours. For example, they may do freeway lane closures from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., or even occasional full closures at night with detours, but daytime traffic must largely be maintained. This inherently slows down the work. They might only get a few hours of productivity in each night on certain parts of the job. It's a bit like performing open heart surgery on a living patient. You can't just stop the blood flow, or in this case, traffic flow entirely. You have to work carefully, rerouting traffic like a bloodstream around the work zone, doing things in steps. Or think of it as remodeling your kitchen while trying to cook dinner each day. You might set up a temporary kitchen in another room, move appliances around, and do the renovation in phases so you're never completely without a stove or sink. It's doable, but it makes the project take longer than it could than if you just could close the kitchen entirely. So similarly, building a new interchange often involves staging. Maybe first they build a part of the new bridge next to the old one while traffic stays on the old bridge, then shift traffic on the new part, demolish the old bridge, and build the remaining part, and so on. Each stage is like a mini project. Safety considerations also play a role. The contractor has to ensure worker safety and driver safety, so setting up proper barriers, signage, and sometimes proceeding more slowly is necessary. Caltrans requires strict safety and traffic control measures in construction zones. They even sometimes offer incentives to contractors to finish certain milestones faster, for example, minimize how long a ramp is closed, but there are limits because rushing can compromise safety. Another reason construction can be prolonged is unforeseen challenges. No matter how thorough the design, reality can throw curveballs. You can have unexpected utility lines or old underground structures that might be encountered requiring redesign on the fly. Weather can cause delays. Heavy rain can disrupt grading work. Extreme heat can affect paving schedules, things like that. You're also building complex structures, and those require multiple steps. Fabricating beams, pouring concrete, letting the concrete cure, which typically needs time to reach strength, often 28 days for full strength, then do the next part. So even if nothing goes wrong, there are still built-in weights. If part of the interchange is built on soft soil, they may have to preload the soil and wait months for it to settle to avoid future settlement. This happens on some projects, and we won't know that until those tests are done in the field. And on a job this size, there are many subcontractors and moving parts to coordinate. Iron workers for rebar, electricians for signals, paving crews, etc. Coordination and sequencing is an art. For context, if construction for Cherry Valley Interchange starts, let's say hypothetically in 2026, you may not see completion until about 2028. The exact schedule will be set when we go out to bid, but typically these interchange replacements aren't done in a single year. During construction, communication with the public also ramps up. You'll see message boards warning of upcoming closures or detour notices. Agencies nowadays often have websites or social media updates for big projects. RCTC does this for some projects in Riverside County, for example. It's all to help drivers navigate the change. It can definitely test drivers' patience, months of orange cones and temporary lane shifts. But remember, behind the scenes, crews are working systematically to build something that will serve us for decades. This inconvenience is temporary, the improvements are lasting. Every time I drive by a construction site like that, I remind myself it's progress in action, and folks are out there in the hot sun or cold night making our future commute better. Eventually, the day comes when the last layer of asphalt is laid and the traffic signals are activated, and you get to drive on the new interchange in its final configuration. That's an exciting moment, but we're not quite done yet. There's one more phase often overlooked: wrapping up all the project paperwork and ensuring everything is truly finished. Let's briefly touch upon that. So finally, we reach the project closeout, or which is the last phase. By now, the interchange is built and open to traffic. So what's left? Closeout is about all the final documentation, payments, and evaluations that formally complete the project. It's a bit like how after you move into a new house, you still have to sort out closing documents, maybe a final walkthrough, warranties, things like that. During closeout, the resident engineer and project team prepare the final records of the project. They compile everything into a project history file, all the change orders, material test results, certifications, the work met standards. This creates a permanent record. As-built drawings are finalized. These are the plans marked up to reflect any changes made during construction, giving an accurate map of what was actually built. This is very useful for future maintenance or if another project comes along in the area. Financial matters are settled. The contractor submits final invoices and the agency makes final payments. There's something called the final contract estimate, which is essentially the final cost accounting. If there were any claims or disputes, say the contractor encountered something unexpected and is asking for extra compensation, those need to be resolved. Sometimes this extends after construction if negotiations or even legal proceedings are involved. Environmental mitigation is monitored. If the environmental document required, for example, planting 100 trees as mitigation, the team has to ensure that's done and perhaps monitor those plantings for a few years. Only once all mitigation measures are confirmed completed can you fully close out. There's right-of-way cleanup. There might be some temporary easements that need to be cleared, returning a temporary staging area back to the owner in good condition, for example, or utility arrangements to finalize. All that's wrapped up. Final reports are written, and often a post-project evaluation is done to capture lessons learned. Caltrans considers a project fully complete only when all those activities are done, which can be months or even a year or two after the road opens. For example, you might drive on the new Cherry Valley Interchange when it opens and think, great, it's done. But the project team will likely still be busy closing contracts and files for some time. However, that won't affect the public. It's all back-end work. At the very end, the project is formally accepted and closed. The books are settled. The new interchange becomes just part of the highway system maintained by Caltrans. And life moves on with, ideally, a smoother commute and safer intersections than before. It's quite a journey, isn't it? From the twinkle of an idea in a planner's eye all the way to a finished interchange serving thousands of drivers each day. For Cherry Valley, we watched that journey go from 2017, when the project was identified, to 2023 with approvals in hand, to now in 2025 with design underway, and still a few years to go until opening. That's nearly a decade of effort, which leads to a fair question. Why does it have to take so long? Let's recap the core reasons, because understanding them can help make the waiting easier. Why do these projects take so long? To wrap up, here are the key reasons interchange improvements projects and highway projects in general take a long time, using our discussion in the Cherry Valley project as context. Thorough environmental reviews. Major projects must comply with strict environmental laws. Agencies study multiple alternatives, including doing nothing, and identify the least environmentally damaging practicable alternative. They analyze impacts on noise, air, water, wildlife, and more, often preparing large reports. This process, along with the public input and revisions, can span years. For example, our environmental phase took about 5 years. It's lengthy, but it ensures the project is responsible and can withstand legal and community scrutiny. Funding and budgeting cycles. Big projects need big funding. An interchange might cost on the order of tens of millions of dollars. The Cherry Valley project is estimated around $70 million. Assembling that funding is like piecing together a financial puzzle. Often money comes from various sources: local development fees, county and regional transportation commissions, state highway funds, federal grants. Agencies may need to apply for grants or get in line for state budget cycles. These things don't happen overnight. You may wait for the next fiscal year or transportation bill. Sometimes a project pauses in a shelf-ready state until money is allocated. Interagency coordination. Project crossing city, county, and state jurisdictions involve many stakeholders. In our case, the City of Calimesa, County of Riverside, RCTC, WRCOG, and Caltrans are all players, plus agencies like the Water Quality Control Board for stormwater permits and California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Getting all these entities to review, approve, and collaborate adds time. Each agency has its own processes and requirements. It's a bit like a committee. It's a bit like committee decision making, necessary for thoroughness, but not speedy. Right-of-way acquisition. Buying property or obtaining easements can be slow and sometimes contentious. By law, fair negotiations must be attempted, appraisals done, offers made. A willing seller transaction might close in under a year, but any disputes can lead to court and take 2 years or more to resolve. Projects try to start this early, but they can't finalize until the design is certain. Relocating utilities and securing permits also fall here. Each utility or permit adds coordination time. Maintaining traffic during construction. Unlike building on a blank slate, working on an active highway is a slow dance. Construction schedules are often constrained by lanes when lanes can be closed. For example, only being able to work short overnight windows prolongs the duration. Crews might prefer to tear down a bridge in one go, but they do it in pieces to let cars through during the day. This elongates the timeline, but is necessary to avoid undue delay to the public. Safety considerations also mean tasks can't be rushed. Complex construction challenges. Large infrastructure jobs can face unexpected challenges, from unanticipated soil issues to rare endangered species discoveries, or even just bad weather seasons. Good project management builds in contingency time, but major surprises can still push schedules out. Additionally, certain technical steps just take time by their nature. For example, concrete curing, settlement periods for soil, fabrication of custom bridge girders. It's not all in active time. Often the project is progressing, but it may seem slow externally. Administrative processes. Public projects have layers of oversight to ensure transparency and quality. This includes reviews, approvals at various checkpoints, audits, etc. It adds some time compared to a private project, but is crucial for accountability. Even after construction, as we discussed, closeout activities like final inspections, paperwork, and audits can take months, although by that point the road is usually open. In summary, these projects are like moving a mountain with a teaspoon. It's doable with steady effort and careful planning, but it's not instant. Each phase we went through has a purpose to make sure the interchange is safe, effective, and a wise investment of public funds. So there you have it, the Caltrans QMAP process and all its phases in a nutshell, as seen through the lens of our own I-10 Cherry Valley Boulevard Interchange project. It's a long journey from concept to completion: project initiation, PA&ED, PS&E, right-of-way, bidding, construction, and closeout, each phase building on the previous one. For residents of Calimesa and Beaumont, this process explains why you've heard about the interchange upgrades for years. Project isn't stuck or forgotten. It's moving through the pipeline. In fact, as we speak, engineers are designing the details in the PS&E phase, and the city is coordinating funding and preparing for right-of-way needs. It may take a few more years before you drive on that diverging diamond interchange, but when you do, you'll know the care and effort that went into making it a reality. Next time you see a construction zone or hear about a project in the news, you'll have a better idea of the story behind it. The studies done, the public meetings held, the designs drawn, the land bought, and the plans made to handle traffic. It's not fast work, but it's important work. As the saying goes, the best outcomes take time. Thank you for hanging in there with us with this detailed explanation. I hope I've demystified the process for you. If you found this informative, feel free to share it with your neighbors or friends who are curious about local transportation projects. Your commute matters, and so does knowing what goes into improving it. So with that, we will wrap up the show. Please join us at our next City Council meeting this Monday, June 2nd at 6 p.m. at the Norton Young Love Senior Center, 908 Park Avenue here in Calimesa. If you can't make it in person, you can watch online at calimesa.gov/YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Follow the podcast on both Instagram and TikTok, where you can find us at Calimesa Insider, all one word. Finally, if you prefer the audio version of the podcast, you can find us on all major podcast platforms by just searching for Calimesa Insider. You can even tell your Amazon Alexa to play the Calimesa Insider Podcast. Our next episode is a big one, our 50th episode, and I have something very special you won't want to miss. Until then, have a great week, and I will talk to you again next time. Thank you for joining us.